Hello everyone, welcome back to Between the Lines. This is the second installment in a series of videos in which we've been doing a line-by-line analysis of the poem Nutting by William Wordsworth. So if you haven't watched the previous video, I'll leave a link to it in the description so you can go and check it out. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. This is where we left off in the previous video. Wordsworth has left his cottage and gone deep into the woods in search of hazelnuts. Right, so that's why the poem is called Nutting, because the poet, narrator, is going out into the woods to collect nuts. So this is where we left off, right? He's finally reached a section of the forest in which there are huge, tall, erect hazel trees, right? And he's just admiring sort of the grandeur and the beauty of whatever he's looking at. Right, so he describes the scene this way. He says, "But the hazels rose tall and erect." Right, the hazels rose tall and erect, with tempting clusters hung. And this is where we left off in the previous video. So let's move on. "A virgin scene. A little while I stood, breathing with such suppression of the heart as joy delights in, and with wise restraint, voluptuous, fearless of a rival, eyed the banquet, or beneath the trees I sate, among the flowers, and with the flowers I played." So he's referring to that scene, to whatever he's looking at, as a virgin scene, right? Why is that? It's because no one else has been there, right? He's the first person to be there. It is sort of an untouched scene. Untouched. Right, so no human has been there before, and he's the first one to experience that scenery, right? So he says he stood there for a little while, breathing with such suppression of the heart as joy delights in. What does this mean? You must have heard of this expression, being breathless, or, something is breathtaking, right? And that just means that you are so stunned by something that you're looking at that, it's almost hard to breathe, right? You almost forget to breathe for a second. So that's what Wordsworth also is experiencing here. So he says he was breathing with such suppression of the heart as joy delights in. This is actually a simile. This "as" here is a simile, right? Simile. I might have misspelled that, but we're just going to go with the spelling for now. So it's a simile. He's talking about a type of suppression of the heart, or a sense in which you are not able to breathe properly because of the extreme joy that you're dealing with, right? So it says he was breathing with such suppression of the heart as joy delights in. So joy takes delight in a certain kind of suppression of the heart, and that is what we call the state of being breathless. Breathless, right? Cool. And he says, with wise restraint, voluptuous, fearless of a rival, eyed the banquet. So he says he was exercising restraint, meaning he was looking at the hazelnuts, but he was not immediately sort of going after them. He was not immediately trying to pluck everything from every tree and eat it, right? So he was just sort of staggered for a second, and he was just looking at the scenery. And he says voluptuous. So something that's voluptuous is something that's well endowed. So well endowed, right? So if you have a lot of something, a lot of grapes on a grapevine, then, that's like voluptuous. There is an excess of something. And he says he was fearless of a rival. He knew that he had no competition there. So there was no other human there in order to come and compete with Wordsworth in eating all the hazelnuts, right? So he had no competition. So that's what he means by fearless of a rival. He had no competition. He was fearless, right? Eyed the banquet. To eye something is to look at something, right? So to eye something is to look at something. I'll just write it down. To look at. So he was looking at the banquet. The word banquet refers to a feast, right? Like a like a huge feast where many people gather and there's a lot of food, right? That's a banquet. So he's referring to these hazelnuts, like these huge collections of hazelnuts. And he's saying that it was like a banquet or a feast, right? Or beneath the trees I sate. And he goes on to say that he sat down. Sate is a kind of an archaic past tense, a word that's used to refer to the past tense of sat, right? S-A-T, the past tense of sat. So he says he sat down beneath the trees. And the next line is just a continuation of the previous one. Or beneath the trees I sate among the flowers, and with the flowers I played. This is quite obvious, like the meaning is very clear. He sat down and he was among the flowers, and he was playing with the flowers. So you can almost think of this as Wordsworth sort of becoming part of nature. You can imagine like little flowers. Let me draw those here. Like you can just imagine that these are flowers, and Wordsworth is also kind of sitting there among the flowers. It's sort of a powerful image, right? You have a lot of little flowers, and Wordsworth is also almost like one among the flowers. And this is important because Wordsworth will subvert this idea of humanity becoming one with nature as we progress through the poem, right? So this idea that humans can be a nice little part of nature is going to be completely subverted, is going to be completely questioned as we move further along. Yeah, so let's move on to the next slide then. A temper known to those who, after long and weary expectation, have been blessed with sudden happiness beyond all hope. Perhaps it was a bower beneath whose leaves the violets of 5 seasons reappear and fade, unseen by any human eye. So the word temper just means a state of mind, right? State of mind. So your temper is whatever state of mind that you're in. Like if you're really angry, then that's a particular state of mind. If you're very happy, that's a particular state of mind. So temper just means a state of mind. And he's saying the kind of temper that he had at that moment when he was sitting down among the flowers in that little bower, that temper is known to those people who, after long and weary expectation, have been blessed with sudden happiness beyond all hope. So all of us have expectations, right? We all desperately want some things to happen. It could be that you want to get a nice job, you want to graduate, whatever it might be. All of us have something that we desperately want. And if you've been wanting it for a long time and you haven't gotten it, and then there comes a point when you finally get it, how would you feel? That sort of happiness, that's the temper that Wordsworth felt when he, after his long journey through the forest, finally got to that beautiful bower and he sat down there. So that's what he's talking about. A temper known to those who, after long and weary expectation, weary is something that's tiring, right? So let me write it down. Weary is tiring. Something that makes you tired. A temper known to those who, after long and weary expectation, have been blessed with sudden happiness beyond all hope. And blessed is just blessed, right? It's just a different form of the same word. To be blessed is just to be blessed, right? With sudden happiness beyond all hope. Perhaps it was a bower beneath whose leaves the violets of 5 seasons reappear. So a bower, like I've already discussed in the previous video, is just a little section of a forest, where you go to sort of take rest or something. It's like a little section of the forest that is conducive to human beings being there, right? So it's not like a dangerous place or anything. It's a nice little section of the forest. That's a bower. So he was imagining that this bower, beneath whose leaves, so in the shade of the trees, in that bower, there are violets. Violets are a particular type of flower. So violets are a type of flower. So beneath the trees, there are violets, and Wordsworth says, the violets in the shade there, they reappear throughout the 5 seasons and fade. And when he says the violets fade, it just means that the flowers wither away, right? So one curious thing here is that he says 5 seasons, but there are only 4 normally accepted seasons, right? You have spring, you have summer, you have autumn, and then you have winter. And those are the 4 seasons. But Wordsworth says 5 seasons. Why is that? To be honest, it's very hard to come to a conclusive understanding of this. In my opinion, it's just because he's so happy that he's almost sort of forgotten himself, right? He's so elated that instead of saying 4 seasons, he says 5. And that's my interpretation of it. So he says this bower was a beautiful place, and in the shade of the trees, beautiful violets, which are little flowers, violets grow and then fade. And these violets, these flowers are unseen by any human eye. So this is happening without anyone being there to witness it. Right. So this growth and death of violets is unseen by any human eye. Let's move on. He's going on to describe the bower, or this little section of the forest in which he was in, right? Where fairy water breaks do murmur on forever. And I saw the sparkling foam, and with my cheek on one of those green stones that, fleeced with moss under the shady trees, lay round me, scattered like a flock of sheep. So he's saying there was perhaps like a little stream, like a river perhaps, that was flowing next to sort of the area in which he was in. So you can imagine a little, section of a little clearing in the forest, and right next to it there's a river flowing, or there's like a little stream of water. Right, and he says that water did murmur on. To murmur is to make sort of like a low rumbling sound, a murmur. And he says he heard the water, the murmuring of the water, right? So, and he also says he saw the sparkling foam. The sparkling foam is just, so when water flows rapidly, you see white foam on top of the water, right? So he's just talking about that. Right, where fairy water breaks do murmur on forever, and I saw the sparkling foam, and with my cheek on one of those green stones that, fleeced with moss under the shady trees, lay around me, scattered like a flock of sheep. So first he was standing in that little section of the forest, and then he sat down, and now he's laying his cheek on top of one of the stones that was there, and all the stones there were, as he says, green, right? So all of the stones were covered with moss. Fleeced with moss is the term that he uses. And Wordsworth just sort of lays down there. So now he lies down there. He doesn't lay down there, he lies down there, right? So first he was standing, and then he sat down, and then he's now lying down, and his cheek is on one of the green stones. And he says there were a lot of these types of stones, right? So you can imagine a lot of green stones, right? And Wordsworth is lying down with his cheek on one of those stones, and he says these stones looked like a flock of sheep. The stones were scattered like a flock of sheep, right? So let's move on. I heard the murmur and the murmuring sound in that sweet mood when pleasure loves to pay tribute to ease. Right, so I think it would be better if we sort of ended this video here. We only have like a few more lines, maybe like 10 or 12 more lines, and we can get to those in the next video. So I'm going to end this video here. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers.